Welcome to today's webinar on food safety for safe and wholesome foods. I'm Colette D. Phelps with University of Idaho Extension, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Our speaker today is Dr. Jang Ho Kim, who is a food safety specialist with University of Idaho Extension, located on the Moscow campus. Before we start the webinar, I would like to go ahead and go over some tips for viewing this webinar. First, if you close the other programs that are running on your computer, that could help you have more clarity with your sound and speed. If you are having problems, you can do one of two things. You can go ahead and call in on the number provided in your welcome email, and then you could mute your computer sound so you don't get feedback. That should help with any problems that you have with sound. And then the other thing is, if you're experiencing any technical issues, you can go ahead and send me a message in the chat. You'll find the chat at the bottom of your screen. There's a bar, you'll see the chat box, and in there you can just type any questions you have or concerns about technical issues. That way I can let you know if that's something that we're experiencing throughout the whole webinar, or if it's something that's unique to your computer or your Wi-Fi. Next, we have an opportunity at the end of this webinar to ask questions of Dr. Kim. So you'll see again at the bottom of your screen in that bar, a Q&A box. That is the box for you to ask any questions about the content of the webinar. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll go ahead and answer those questions. The slide handouts will be available from the pnwfoodsafety.org website by tomorrow afternoon. So you don't need to write down everything that's on the webinar slides today. You'll be able to go to our program website, view the recording, as well as download the handouts. With that orientation, I'd like to go ahead and hand the webinar over to Dr. Kim. Welcome, Dr. Kim.
Okay, thank you, Colette, for your introduction and the setting of this webinar. Hi everyone, my name is Jang Ho Kim, Consumer Food Safety Extension Specialist at the University of Idaho. And today, as Colin mentioned, I'm going to talk about food safety for safe and wholesome food. And this webinar will cover general food safety information, including food poisoning, hazards in food, major foodborne pathogens, and how to prevent food poisoning. And this webinar is a part of the USDA NIFA Food Safety Outreach Program multi-state project to provide Food Safety Modernization Act-related food safety information. And this project is a collaborative efforts of University of Idaho, Washington State University, University of Alaska at Fairbanks, and Oregon State University. Okay. Let's begin. What is food poisoning? Food poisoning is illness from consumption of food containing harmful substances, microorganisms, or toxins. Common symptoms are stomach aches, vomit, diarrhea, and fever. Sometimes it causes long-term illness and even death. What we have to remember is food poisoning can be caused by food that looks, smells, and tastes normal. Basically, there are three types of hazards in food: chemical, physical, and biological hazards. In the next few slides, I will talk about chemical and physical hazards briefly, and then the biological hazards will be covered a little bit detailed because most food poisoning or disease are caused by biological hazard. Chemical hazards. Many chemicals are used in the kitchen or food processing area. Chemicals are used to clean and sanitize food contact surfaces, utensils, and equipment. Sometimes we are using chemicals to control pests, even though we have to store them in the separated area. In this case, in case these chemicals are spilled on or near food and you don't notice about it, this can make people sick and even dead. And some chemicals are confused with food or drink. For example, some rat poisons are powder form, and these just look like flour or sugar or salt. Weed killer just looks like vinegar or juice. And you know what happens when you make this kind of mistake. There are also toxic chemicals produced by microorganisms, plants, and animals, such as botulinum toxin, poisonous mushroom, swellfish, etc. These toxins have no taste, no smell, and cannot be destroyed by cooking. Physical hazards are any foreign subject that can injure people and contain harmful microorganisms. These physical hazards include dead insects like cockroaches, hair, jewelry like a ring or earrings, broken glass, metal pieces. As I mentioned earlier, biological hazards are the most common sources for foodborne illnesses. When you talk about biological hazards in food, it mostly means microbial hazards. So microorganisms that can make us sick are viruses, bacteria, parasites, and some types of molds. Common viral hazards are rotaviruses, norovirus, and hepatitis virus. Salmonella species, E. coli 157, Listeria monocytogenes, Campylobacter jejuni, Clostridium botulinum are well-known pathogenic bacteria. Parasites include Toxoplasma gondii, Trichinella spiralis, Cryptosporidium, tapeworm, and roundworm. Some molds produce mycotoxin. For example, mold Aspergillus flavus produces aflatoxin in peanut, corn, soybeans, and grains like rice. Since bacteria are the most common causes of food poisoning, I will talk about some of major bacterial pathogens in the following slides. Salmonella is a rod-shaped pathogenic bacteria, and they are commonly found in the intestine of warm-blooded animals, raw meat and poultry, raw milk, and raw eggs. So common vehicles of Salmonella are undercooked or contaminated cooked meat, raw milk, and eggs. Incubation period of this microorganism is 6 to 72 hours to produce endotoxin in victim's intestine. Incubation period is time elapsed between exposure to a specific pathogen and when symptoms and signs are first appeared. So it depends on the initial numbers of the bacteria. If you have a higher number of bacteria, the incubation period will be shortened. Endotoxin is bacterial toxin produced and located within a cell. Common symptoms of salmonellosis are abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomit, and fever. Listeria monocytogenes is a cold-loving microorganism which can grow at the refrigeration temperature. This bacteria is found in soil and water and some animals including poultry and cattle. Common food vehicles are unpasteurized milk, which is raw milk, dairy products including soft cheese, raw fruits and vegetables, ready-to-eat food, and refrigerated food. Incubation period is 7 to 70 days. It so varies. And symptoms are fever and diarrhea, stiff neck, confusion, loss of balance, and conversion in addition to fever and muscle aches. If this bacteria infects pregnant woman, it causes fetal death, preterm labor, or infection of the newborn. Next is Clostridium botulinum. Clostridium botulinum is a spore former and anaerobic microorganism, which means they can grow well under vacuum condition in the absence of air. Because of this pathogen is a critical issue in canning process of low acid food. Low acid food has pH 4.6 or higher. Incubation period is generally short compared to other pathogenic bacteria, 2 to 5 hours, because this pathogen does not need time to invade and damage gastrointestinal tract of the victim. The heat-resistant neurotoxin produced by this bacteria damages people pretty bad. Infected people will have problems in swallowing, talking, and breathing, and double vision and paralysis. Spores and exotoxin cannot be destroyed by normal cooking condition, but pressure cooking. This is why home canners should use pressure cooker. Escherichia coli 0157H7 or E. coli 0157H7 is one of well-known pathogenic bacteria. This pathogen is found in animal intestine, soil, and water, and common food vehicles are undercooked or raw meat, vegetables, unpasteurized milk and juice, and also contaminated water. Incubation period is 2 to 5 days, and symptoms are watery or bloody diarrhea, nausea, vomit, cramps, and fever. Most importantly, sometimes the serious infection causes hemolytic uremic syndrome, which damages blood and blood vessels in kidney of the children. Staphylococcus aureus is a round-shaped bacteria producing heat-resistant toxin. As you can see in the picture, they look like a grape. It is commonly found in human nose, mouth, skin, hands, spot, boils, septic cut, wounds of infected workers. Common food vehicles are dairy products, cold-cooked meat, and poultry. Incubation period is very short, 1 to 7 hours due to toxin already produced in food. Infected person has abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomit, and subnormal temperature. In addition to heat-resistant toxin, this bacteria is salt tolerant, which means salting cannot kill these bacteria. Bacillus cereus is another spore former, producing heat-resistant exotoxin. It is found in the environment like dust and soil. And common food vehicles are cereals, corn flours, spices, and grains like rice. Incubation period is 1 to 5 hours. Symptoms are abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomit, subnormal temperature. This table shows major food poisoning microorganisms. Most of these are previously covered, but Campylobacter jejuni and viral infection. So I will just talk about Campylobacter jejuni and virus on this slide. Campylobacter jejuni is mostly found in poultry and water, milk, and feces. It shows typical symptoms like diarrhea, cramps, fever, and nausea after 2 to 5 days. Virus infection is generally caused by feces, vomitus, and contaminated food and water, and most importantly, infected worker. Symptoms are nausea, vomit, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and headaches with 1 to 2 days of incubation period. These microorganisms are transmitted from contaminated sources to food at several points in the food production chain, which are on the farm or in the field, slaughtering house, processing line, at the point of sale, and home. So any points from farm to table could be contaminated. Now, let's see what are those risks in produce processing. In production and harvest on the farm, such as growing, picking, and bundling, irrigation water, manure, poor field sanitation are potential contamination sources. In washing, sorting, and packaging, washing water and worker can be contaminated. When transporting the product, the transportation vehicle, like a truck, and ice to cool down could be the contamination source. Excuse me. The minimal produce processing like slicing, squeezing, shredding, peeling, and canning can be contaminated by washing water and worker. Sometimes clean and processed products can be contaminated by contacting uncleaned contaminated sources. In the US only, approximately 48 million Americans suffer from foodborne illness annually. This causes 128,000 hospitalizations, and among them, 3,000 people dead. And it cost $51 to $78 billion for medical cost. This graph shows major factors contributing to food poisoning outbreaks are inadequate cooking, fail to control temperature, contaminated equipment, contaminated food sources, poor worker hygiene, etc. Once food is contaminated by live microorganisms, they multiply so rapidly. In general, they double their numbers in every 20 to 30 minutes. So microbially contaminated food is just like a time bomb when pathogens reach to high enough number to make food unsafe. Once food is contaminated, it is very difficult to get rid of foodborne pathogens and their toxins. For this reason, prevention is more important than decontaminating or destroying pathogens already present in food. In order to make sure food does not become contaminated, you need to keep hands and nails clean, keep the kitchen or processing area clean, and handle food safely. And also to kill or slow down the microbial growth, cook high-risk food thoroughly, and keep hot food hot and cold food cold, which means controlling temperature to inhibit microbial growth. Okay, first, to keep hands and nails clean, we need to wash hands and nails thoroughly with warm running water and soap. Then dry hands thoroughly and try not to touch unclean surface again. If there is any cut or wound, cover with a Band-Aid and wear gloves. We should wash our hands every time before eating, preparing, or handling food, between handling raw meat, poultry, seafood, and handling cooked or ready-to-eat food, after coughing, sneezing, or touching unclean objects like handkerchief, after using restroom, handling rubbish, touching animals, and handling chemicals such as cleaners, sanitizers, and pesticides, we should wash our hands. This picture shows how pathogens to be transferred by hand. When you touch your body parts like hair, ear, eye, nose, mouth, and dirty clothes and jewelry. Also, when you touch potentially infected area like cut, sores, pimples, and also when you touch contaminated or risky uncooked food or contaminated equipment, you can transfer pathogenic microorganisms to clean and safe food and contaminate food. When we clean plates, utensils, and equipment, we need to scrape and rinse off food residues on the surface. Wash with clean, soapy, and warm water. Rinse with clean water, dry thoroughly. Then, if necessary, apply sanitizer after cleaning first. And you need to remember that sanitizer does not work well on dirty surfaces. So, clean first and then sanitize. Regarding pest and animal control, we need to prevent any pests entering to the kitchen or processing area. Get rid of any food residues or trash attracting pests. Keep domestic animals out of the food preparing area. When you handle food safely, when you handle or cook food, we need to keep sick or uncomfortable feeling worker from preparing food. We need to keep risky food from finished and ready-to-eat food to avoid cross-contamination. Protect food in the refrigerator by using covered containers and placing those food properly. For example, we need to put riskier food on the bottom and safer food on top. So put poultry or seafood on the lowest shelf, pork next, then beef, and finish it or fruits and vegetables on top of those. This way, we can prevent contamination by dripping of risky food. When you pick up or dispense food, use clean utensil or equipment. Always try to wear clean clothes or apron. When you wash produce to be eaten raw, use clean running water. When you cook this high-risk food, you need to cook properly. High-risk foods are means burger patties, sausages, rolled roast, stuffed meat, rabbit, like wild animal, seafood, poultry. We need to cook this food with the minimum internal temperatures and measure temperature using a food thermometer before removing food out of the heat source. For example, you need to cook poultry to 165 Fahrenheit degree of the minimum internal temperature. Ground beef and eggs to 160, seafood and steak or roast to 145 Fahrenheit degree and leave them for 3 minutes. Keeping hot food hot and cold food cold is critical to prevent unwanted microbial growth. So always avoid the temperature between 40 and 140 Fahrenheit degree, which is 5 and 60 Celsius degree. This is also called the temperature danger zone, which allows bacteria growth. However, some pathogenic bacteria like Listeria monocytogenes As I said earlier, they are cold loving bacteria, can survive and grow at refrigeration temperature. Preventing microbial growth is very important because it is very difficult to kill pathogenic bacteria once the food is contaminated. In order to keep hot food hot, we need to keep cooked food at 140 Fahrenheit degree or above until served. When we serve the food to be prepared in advance, refrigerate or freeze and then reheat before serving. And cook or reheat packaged food following any manufacturer's directions. In order to keep cold food cold, we need to take cold groceries to the refrigerator as soon as possible. And keep cold and frozen food cold as much as you can if it takes a long time before it can be placed in a refrigerator or freezer. Keep cold food at 40 Fahrenheit degree or lower. And keep cold food in the refrigerator as much as possible. And also, thawing frozen food is very critical. Thaw frozen food in the refrigerator and or microwave. If the food is packaged in a plastic bag, use running tap water. Also, follow any direction on the label of cold or frozen food. And also, most importantly, check the temperature of the refrigerator on a regular basis. There are also 4 simple steps to keep your food safe. Clean, separate, cook, and chill. So clean your hands and nails and kitchen or food preparing area, and separate finished or ready to eat food from risky uncooked food, and cook high risk food thoroughly as recommended. And this also includes keep hot food hot at 140 Fahrenheit degree or higher, and keep cold food cold. In summary, in order to prevent food poisoning, we need to keep our hands and nails clean. Keep the kitchen and food preparing area clean. Handle food safely. Cook high-risk food thoroughly. And keep hot food hot and cold food cold. If you have any question, please type in question in the question box.
Thank you, Dr. Kim, for that presentation. Right now, we don't have any questions, so I'm going to give it a couple minutes to see if anyone has questions. In the meantime, I'd like to know what your recommendations are if somebody suspects they do have a foodborne illness.
If somebody has foodborne illness,
if somebody suspects that they do, because lots of times the symptoms described for foodborne illness could also be, the flu, or people feel like they're coming down with a cold. So how do people distinguish between something like that and foodborne illness? And then what should they do if they suspect they do have a foodborne illness?
Usually when you have the foodborne poisoning, you will have abdominal pain or cramps and diarrhea. Those two are very distinguished from the just normal flu and other infection.
Okay, great. And then if that's the situation, do you recommend that they contact a healthcare provider, or how does someone know what they should do next or when to report a potential foodborne illness?
In either situation, probably, I mean, if you have some, food, pretty bad food, I mean, like, contaminated food, then at home, then you will have somebody has same symptom, right? I mean, if you have the diarrhea and, abdominal pain and your family had the same meal together, then if that incident is from food poisoning, they must have same symptom, because it is related with the pathogenic bacteria on specific food that they had. So in that case, you will see, I mean, that is pretty bad, contaminated food. Or if just only one who has those symptoms, that maybe then might not be food poisoning. But I don't know. I mean, usually most of people just ignore those kind of diarrhea or abdominal pain. Most of people do, actually. It's unfortunate, but most of people do. But yeah, it's a good idea to contact the local health provider or your family doctor. Ask them what could be wrong, and then tell them what you had with your meal. Probably that is the ideal situation.
Great, thank you. I have an additional question, and that is, in terms of sanitizers that are appropriate for food contact surfaces, how would somebody identify that the sanitizer they're using is appropriate to kill pathogens of concern on food contact surfaces?
That situation is very varied. I mean, depending on the situation and the cleanness of the surface. So if we assume that the food contact surface very clean, then sanitizer will work very well. But if there is any food residues and is in uncleaned area, then sanitizer cannot work very well, because most of the time sanitizer is chemically react with organic materials. So it depends on cleanness of the surface, of working surface. But in the normal condition, probably you have to follow the direction of sanitizers, manufacturer's direction on the label of sanitizer. Like a concentration and all that. So mostly, for example, the bleach, you can easily find in the grocery store. Bleach provide some direction how to use it. I mean, the concentration, all that. So that may help, but you cannot tell. I mean, you cannot tell the effectiveness of your sanitizer is how good, how bad, or So first, before using sanitizer, clean the surface first, and then follow the direction of label of the sanitizer.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Well, with that, we don't have any other questions. So thank you very much for your presentation. For those who joined us today, we thank you for attending today's webinar. The webinar recording will be posted at pnwfoodsafety.org, which is the website for this project. Again, we thank you for joining us today. Please check out our website. There are additional food safety resources there and recordings of other food safety webinars in this series. With that, we thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.